the most fascinating realms is the Asura realm. And I really think that a lot of people can learn from the Asura mentality, because it's fairly common, and it's a fascinating area, and we'll talk about this Asura realm. First of all, what is this word Asura? Where does it come from?
There's one mention in the commentaries of the derivation of the name. The Asuras were thrown out of the Tawatingsa heaven after getting drunk. And they were thrown down the side of the mountain, and they regained consciousness halfway down the mountain as they were tumbling down, and they cried out, Nasur Bhavati, Nasur Bhavati, meaning that we will not drink liquor, we will not drink liquor. So it's kind of like the human beings that get drunk and get in trouble, and then the next day they're, I'm never going to drink again.
Yeah, and they were drinking at the highest level, weren't they? This was champagne of the highest quality.
Yeah.
They're thrown out of aristocracy, or the highest realms of maybe intellectual and artistic capacities, because where are they living when they're thrown out? What are they thrown out of?
Okay, well, we go back to the origin story of the Asuras. They were the original inhabitants of Tawatingsa heaven at the peak of Mount Sinaru. And Saka and his 33 gods had been human beings who made much merit on the earth, doing various kind of building projects and things for the common good. And then when they died from a human birth, they came to rebirth in Tawatingsa. And the Asuras were the inhabitants of Tawatingsa at the time, welcomed them, and held a feast to honor them, which included copious quantities of this liquor that they brewed.
Is there any specific name for this liquor?
Dibapana.
Dibapana.
Divine drink.
Divine drink.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of speculation on what form of drug that is. And
well, it seems to have been alcohol. Basically, may have been extremely exquisite, as you say, like champagne, heavenly version of champagne. And Saka told his crew, "Don't drink any of this liquor; it'll make you heedless." And the Asuras drank and drank and drank until they passed out and lay snoring on the golden sands of Tawatingsa. And Saka said to his companions, "Pick them up by the heels and throw them down the mountain. We shall not share heaven with such as these." And they were tossed down the mountain, and they came to rest at the root of the mountain under the ocean, which is a curious detail, because they're not described, their existence and in their Asura Bhavana, the realm of the Asuras, is not described as being aquatic in any way. They weren't like mermen or anything like that. They were air-breathing, terrestrial sort of beings, but they were under the ocean. So the way I come to interpret that is that the surface of the sea acts as a kind of a magic gateway or passageway that enter their realm. So they're in this Asura Bhavana at the bottom of Mount Sinaru, and the Tawatingsa Devas are at the top. And the two realms are kind of mirror images of each other. The Asuras, the Devas at the top of the mountain are primarily sensual beings. So they're caught in sensuality. The Asura beings are caught in the opposite defilements of ill will, aversion, anger, jealousy. So the Tawatingsa Devas looking down see the Asura Bhavana at the bottom as a kind of distorted mirror image of themselves, a kind of funhouse version of the Tawatingsa gods. And these beings, the Asura beings, forget that they're not in heaven until their tree, there's a world tree in each realm, a characteristic tree that lasts for the entire world age. It's called a Kaparuka.
Kappa.
Kappa is world age.
So
Ruka
Kappa is
tree.
like an eon.
Yes. Yes.
The entire duration of a world system.
Yes.
And
Ruka
is tree.
Yeah.
So very interesting that they have this beautiful like symbols. They use symbols so well.
Yes.
And each realm has a symbolic tree.
Yes.
And how many of these trees are there? How many realms?
There's 7.
This is very good for memory as well, isn't it?
Yes.
To help pin down the characteristic of each of these realms.
Yes. There's one tree on each of the world islands, and one in the realm of the 4 great kings, one in the Tawatingsa, and one in Asura realm. And
what is the name of the one in the Asura realm?
Chittapatali.
Chittapatali.
The one in the Tawatingsa heaven is the Parichataka tree, and that's probably the most famous, the most comes up the most in the stories, and it's very beautiful blossoms. And when, for example, when the Buddha entered Parinibbana, the Tawatingsa Dewa showered the site with blossoms from the Parichataka tree,
falling out of the heavens.
Yes.
Into the human realm.
Yes. So when this tree comes into flower, then the Asuras see their tree doesn't have this same beautiful flowers, and they realize they're not in heaven anymore. And then they swarm up the sides of the mountain like ants up a pillar to attack Tawatingsa and try and get back in.
Right.
So there's a continual wars between the Tawatingsa gods and the Asuras. This is the highest. The Tawatingsa heaven, we could say, is the highest realm in which conflict occurs.
Right.
These battles between the Dewas and the Asuras.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Just the psychological ramifications of this. The idea of having fallen out of a more divine or a better state of existence, and every now and then you're reminded, because your ordinary states of mind become the norm, but every now and then you remember what it was like to be at a higher level of being. I mean, this happens a lot with drugs and alcohol for people. And then they might go on a strict program to regain their former state of grace or their elevated condition. And it seems though the motivation is wrong, that it's a motivation of anger. What's happened to me, maybe they're angry at themselves, maybe they're angry at the world, but you can't get it back through anger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
they can never succeed. They can never conquer heaven. They always
an
get
intrinsic-
beaten back.
Yeah, so it's an endless Groundhog Day kind of.
Yes.
So, what this battle that they have now? They come up out of the sea. They pass through this magic surface of the sea. Now, you were talking about, as we investigate what they mean by under the ocean. It seems to be not underwater, but kind of through almost a mirror surface that you step through the mirror.
Yes.
Almost Alice in Wonderland. You step through this mirror surface into a different realm.
Yeah.
I know in the Greek mythology they often use the sea to represent the above the ocean is the conscious mind, and then the unconscious mind. They have beings living and functioning in the unconscious world. So maybe the Asuras have fallen into a certain level of unconsciousness as well, like subconsciousness.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a valid interpretation. And I think all these stories have multi-levels of meaning. And it's certainly one valid interpretation. We also find this similar story in the idea of an older race of gods that were overthrown by the newcomers in Greek mythology, and also in Norse mythology with the Asgard and the storm giants. And this is a common, I think, Aryan heritage. That all these pantheons have this story of the old gods being overthrown. So it's another level of meaning there. Yeah,
there's a reference, some sort of reference to an earlier innocent, perhaps, condition, which, of course, that's, as in North America, as alcohol came to North America, the natives did not handle it well, and they tumbled out of heaven as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's go back to the Asura's attempt to regain heaven. Who are they fighting with? Who are they attempting to get back?
Well, they're fighting primarily with the Dewas of Tawatingsa, but the Dewas of Tawatingsa also have the allies in the realm of the four great kings. And
they have allies.
Yeah, well, they're the vassals of the Tawatingsa gods, right? So they have lines of defense all up Mount Sinaru that are protected by Nagas, Supanas, Kumbhandas, all these sorts of beings. And if the Asura gods get past all these lines of defense, they get up to the gates of Tawatingsa, then the very last defense is these statues of Saka in his form of Indra, the wrathful thunderbolt-wielding deity. And when the Asuras see these statues, they become terrified and run back to their home.
So this explain maybe some of the statuary around Buddhist temples. You sometimes see a naga or a dragon as the...
Yeah, these are... The idea of this is to keep evil, malevolent beings away, frighten them away.
Right. Yeah, so it's very interesting that it's been really embedded in the architecture of Buddhist structures, and somehow in European, you have these gargoyles and so forth. You see them in monasteries, temples, cathedrals. They have the same. It's amazing the universality of this, isn't it? So they make their way. Do they manage to get past the realm of the four great kings sometimes?
Yes. Yeah, they get it. And it has the relative strength of the Dewas and the Asuras is in a large degree controlled by what goes on here on the earth in the human realm. If humans are keeping good morality, then when they die, relatively more of them are reborn in the Dewa realm, and the Dewa host is increased. But if people on the earth are behaving immorally in a heedless way, then more of them are reborn as Asuras, and the Asura army grows in strength, and they experience victories in their battles.
Similar to this Christian idea, as in heaven, so on earth. So the Buddha also mentions that, when people take the 8 precepts, go to the monastery, take the 8 precepts for day and a night, that the strength of in heaven, the population in heaven grows, and why the Tawatingsa Devas notice the decrease in population is because people are not going to the Buddhist monasteries, keeping the 8 precepts. You must go. Take the 8 precepts, because you do want to be in the Tawatingsa heaven. You don't want to be an ex-Tawatingsa person thrown down into the realm of the faded glory. So So do they ever succeed in this battle, or is this...
No, neither side can ever have a complete victory. Because it's said that the 2 cities of the 2 sides are impregnable. So the greatest victory they can have is to get to the gates of the opposite city, but they can never overthrow it or enter in. So it's a perpetual, endless conflict that can never be fully resolved.
This reminds me a little bit like Athens and Sparta.
Yes.
And the Athenians are not harsh and militaristic. They're more egalitarian and artistic and philosophical. They have democratic vote promotes. But the Spartans, although they're just always militaristic, they can't seem to take over Athens. It's an insight really into what it is that makes a higher dwelling of existence, and one of them is the ability to cooperate and to appreciate beauty and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they managed to get to the gates there. So what happens when the Asuras get to the gates?
Well, they get at the very end. They get frightened away by these statues of Inda.
They lose their nerve.
Yes.
Huh.
They don't seem to be very brave. Actually, they're full of bravado and bluff. And
that's interesting as well.
There's also a story about one of the wars where Saka was coming down the side of the mountain to attack the Asuras in his chariot, and they were passing over the Simbali Grove, which is the grove of trees on the slopes of Sinaru, where the Supanas that we talked about, the giant bird creatures, live. And as he was flying over, he heard cries of distress, and he asked his charioteer Matali, "Where do these heart-rending cries come from?" And he said, "We're destroying the abodes of the Supanas with the passage of our chariot, and they're tumbling into the sea." So we said, "Well, we can't destroy." Saka said, "We can't destroy innocent beings for the sake of victory. Turn the chariot around." And when he turned the chariot around, the Asuras thought that was some kind of maneuver, and he had reinforcements coming. In one version of the story, they thought there were other devas coming down from Tawatingsa, and another version says Sakas from another world system are coming to aid him. And they lost their nerve and ran back to their palace under the sea.
Maybe it's a little lesson for military strategists. The interpretation. Your enemy is always imagining that there's three levels of tactics deep, and sometimes misunderstand the innocent moves. But it's interesting also that they're interested in minimizing collateral damage. So they're not going to destroy the evil and have collateral damage on the innocent. So that's a kind of an ethical standard that they adhere to. That's a lesson also for the modern world. You see this in even high-speed car chases and so forth. It's like, do we really need to do this? Does this matter? Maybe we should just let them get away this time.
The Asuras didn't always keep that same morality. They were rougher, cruder sort of approach. There's another story about the Asuras in one of their passages up the mountain on the shores of Sinaru, where it breaks the ocean. There are communities of these holy seers, Isis.
Isis, or rishis.
Rishis is
as
Sanskrit, And one of them, the leader of one of these communities, asked the Asuras for protection, for safety. Because they tend to just rampage through these villages and knock everything down on their passage heedlessly. And the king of the Asuras, who was at that time, his name was Sambara, he said, "No, we know you're partisans of Saka, so we're not going to spare you." And so they cursed him. And later he woke up in the night screaming. And the other Asuras came to see what was the matter. And he said, "Oh, nothing. He's trying to minimize it." But he had pain in his head, like 100 spears were piercing him. And then his name became Wepachiti, broken mind. And after that, he would have bouts of madness.
Very interesting, the mental health repercussions of this. And he is feeling the repercussions of transgressing the sanctuaries of the rishis.
Yes.
And it's kind of a bit of a warning about holy people and sacred people and so forth, don't mess with them. It comes back to you in the form of mental pain. Mental pain. Yeah. So let's continue. Anything more about the Asuras that we have?
Well, the relationship between Wepachiti and Saka is an interesting one. Because besides being enemies, they were also relatives. Saka was had married the daughter of the Wepachiti. So what does that make him? His father-in-law, or brother-in-law?
Yeah.
He was.
Wepachiti is Saka's father-in-law.
Yes, father-in-law.
Yes, his father-in-law.
Yes.
So here we go with the family dynamics.
Yes, yeah, and so sometimes they would travel about together in a friendly way in between the wars, and sometimes they would be at war with one another.
Like Stalin and whoever it was, who was the American president at the time.
Roosevelt.
Yeah, they were. What do they call them? Odd bedfellows. You have to. Real politics is that you have to deal with. Sometimes you're in open conflict, and sometimes you have to fake friendship as well.
There's a great story about Saka and Sujata, the daughter of Wepachiti, that how they got together. She was originally one of the human wives of Saka when he was still a human being. He had 4 wives, and 3 of them made merit and were reborn in Tawatingsa alongside the other Dewas. But his favorite was Sujata, and she was this kind of frivolous, sensuous bad girl who never did anything meritorious. And so her next birth after that was as a crane, a bird. And Saka went looking for her in the realms, and he saw her as a crane in some mountain pond, and he took her in his chariot and flew her around to show her heaven, and said, this is what you've missed. So you have to, from now on, keep the 5 precepts, and maybe you can be reborn here. So then he tested her by transforming himself into a fish and floating in the pond as if he was dead. And the crane saw this floating fish and thought, oh, this one's dead, I can have this one without breaking the precepts. And then he started flapping, and she dropped him right away. So she was keeping the precepts. So then she went through a series of various other births and finally got reborn as a daughter of the Asura king. And when she came of age, they had a ceremony where all the Asura lords were assembled, and she had a wreath of flowers, and she was to choose her husband, throw this wreath of flowers over the neck of her husband. And Saka came into this realm in the form of an old broken down Asura, and everyone was laughing at him. They're never going to choose you, right? And she, because of her past karmic connection, she felt compelled to throw the wreath over Saka. And then when the wreath went over his neck, he transformed back into Saka. And this enraged all the Asuras. Here is Saka, he's fooled us again. And they all start chasing after him with their weapons. But then just at the nick of time, his charioteer, Matali, came down with his chariot. And they leapt into the bride and groom leapt into the chariot and escaped. So in these old Pali stories, there's even like car chases.
Yeah, that's fabulous. So many things to unpack in that story of relationships as well. The emphasis on if you want to remain in a beautiful relationship, you have to both remain moral. And that occasionally you get tested as well. It says his appearance, Saka's appearance as an old Asura, an old ugly Asura. It's also maybe the Asura's ideas about that they tend to judge on superficial qualities, and that he genuinely is internally beautiful.
Yeah.
He has a genuine beauty to him, which they fail to. They're mocking his physical appearance.
Yes.
But he has this beauty of virtue, and then that becomes revealed. You know? Yes. So that's not just simply on a political level that these things, but also on a personal level, and of course you see this, that whole groups of individuals can influence whole groups of consciousness. You know, the consciousness sort of starts to take over a whole society. Whole groups fall into this whole attitudes. You know, it's amazing. Such subtlety and beauty and nuances and levels of these stories as well.
Yes.
And they're not stories. They're not really fiction. They're actual realities that beings live in, and they live in. And you can see them preparing themselves. And this is what they're really saying: is that they are already preparing the consciousness for full immersion in these realms. Walking around as humans, this is where you're preparing your consciousness for entering into these realms of consciousness. And these are not real. They are as real as it gets. In fact, the material world is simply a backdrop, a stage for consciousness to act out on. The reality is consciousness.
Yes.
And the mere background in the consciousness. So one who is in a depressed state of mind or an angry state of mind cannot see the beauty in nature. But one who's like unburdened and feeling well is endlessly appreciating and seeing the beauty even of the opening of the sky, the sun, the blue casina of the sky.
Yes.
And so forth. Yeah.
There's a story about the Nagas that illustrates this point very well. One of the motifs that comes up in several of the stories is the Nagas want to reward some virtuous human, and they take him into their realm, and he lives in a palace, and he's being served by all these Naga maidens, all in beautiful human form, and there's music and food and all this sort of sensual pleasures. And the way the story usually unfolds, after 100 years in the Naga realm, he gets beyond because of his innate virtue, he gets beyond the desire for sensuality, and he asks to be returned to the human realm, and he then becomes a hermit or an ascetic. But in one story, there's a low, evil sort of scoundrel who tricks the Nagas into thinking he's virtuous, and he gets down into this realm, but he can't enjoy the pleasures. The Naga maidens seem to him like ferocious yakas, and the palace like a dingy prison, and the food is distasteful and coarse.
Right.
So he's unable to experience the sensual pleasures, and it's the same as we might say objective reality, but his subjective experience is entirely different.
Yeah, it's just incredible wisdom. It's like taking a dog to an art gallery, and all the dog smells is the obnoxious smell of oil paint. Yeah. And he sees nothing. He does not see art or anything like this. And in the human consciousness, if one has not developed, one does not see that reality. It's simply not there for one. Yeah. But as one develops, suddenly new things emerge into reality.
Yeah. Sometimes I get the question when I'm talking about this stuff. People want to know, are these realms real? And I tend to think that's a rather naive question. Yeah. So I like to turn it back and ask, well, how real is this realm, and what do you mean by reality?
It is naive, and I think that it's only since the last 200 years that anybody could think to ask such a question.
Yes, that's true.
That everybody before that knew that would be a childish question.
Yeah.
And maybe children know enough not to ask such questions either. You know, they're enraptured by these stories. They're absolutely real. But it's only in the scientific, materialist, linear, annihilationist kind of attitude that you can ask: is this real, measurable with in the chemistry tables, or yeah. So that's. Is there anything else about the Asura realm that you would like to add to that?
We could mention another particular Asura of some importance is Rahu.
Ah, yes, Rahu.
Rahu, who is the largest of all beings with a body.
Mm-hmm.
He's so big that he stands in the ocean and the water doesn't reach up to his knee. And he says, people say this ocean is deep. I don't know where they get that from.
Mm-hmm.
And he is the being who's responsible for eclipses.
Uh-huh.
When he sees the sun or the moon, he grows jealous of their radiance. And he tries to either cover them with his hand, which is a partial eclipse, or he swallows them, which is a total eclipse.
Right.
But he's unable to stop their progress, and he has to release them.
So is this maybe jealousy? This is when one sees a shining intelligence or talent or spiritual capacity, there's some agency in nature that wishes to impede the radiance, and
Yes.
jealous of the radiance.
Yeah.
And it's a massive presence. It's a large thing. One of the things that I take from the story of, remember, Rahu is attempting to swallow the moon, and the devas of the moon come to the Buddha, and they're concerned about this.
Yeah.
He says, your protection is in faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and in virtue, and that the Rahu cannot, and if he really did, the moon would move through his head, you know. And you see this in a part of Asian culture, a kind of response to eclipse is to come out and bang pots and pans and fire off firecrackers and things like making noise to scare away Rahu.
Yeah.
And people who have the scientific disposition tend to dismiss this as like very old, kind of superstitious. But actually, it's in some sense it's a preparation, because what is in every culture, when you get tyrants and dictators attempting to overcome the political system, there is only one possibility, is to protest in large numbers. And so Rahu is also the mentality of tyrants and dictators. It is Stalin, it is Hitler, is Rahu. They're enormous. They're enormous powers, aren't they? And it's only by kind of cooperative noise, protest, that, and the return to virtue and faith that overcomes this. You see this in both in Russian history and in German history. The first thing that went was religion. They had to annihilate the religious structures or twist them. And you had a reformation around the Lutheran church, and some of them became Nazis and so forth. And of course in Marxist Russia, they just squashed the Orthodox things, because that is the source of pushing back on this attempt to swallow. But notice that neither Stalin nor Hitler is around anymore. So
but
no matter how many of the times they do, it passes through their head, and then you get this rebound, this reformation, a return to the church, a return to this kind of see what happens. when darkness surrounds you. You know.
So to just briefly recap the geography that we've covered so far, we've been looking at the inhabitants of Mount Sinnaru, which is the central world mountain, this massive mountain, 84,000 yojanas high and 84,000 yojanas below the sea. Halfway up the mountain are the realms of the four great kings, and various kinds of fantastic beings live on the slopes, like the supanas, the giant birds. At the peak of the mountain is Tawatingsa heaven, the heaven of the 33, the devas, or the gods overseeing this whole world system, ruled by Saka. And at the base of the mountain, under the sea, is the realm of the Asuras, who are the inveterate enemies and rivals of the gods at the peak of the mountain, and continually trying to storm the slopes of the mountain and take back the kingdom of Tawatingsa.